On April 19th, 1775, the first day of the American Revolution, 49 Americans were killed in the battles of Lexington and Concord. Lexington itself suffered the most casualties that day, losing 8 men. Coming in second to Lexington wasn't Concord. It was this coastal fishing village on the north shore of Massachusetts in Essex County. How and why did this North Shore town, who sent its men the furthest distance, come so close to losing the most men in the battles of Lexington and Concord? The farming and shipbuilding town of Danvers, Massachusetts, lost 7 men on April 19th during the battles of Lexington and Concord, second only to Lexington, and more than any of the neighboring towns around the Lexington and Concord area. The militia companies from Danvers, Massachusetts walked, marched, ran 16 miles from their town in coastal Essex County to the Lexington Concord area. What happened to the Danvers men? How did they travel so far, so fast? And where did they end up that so many of them died in the fighting? Hi everyone, my name is Katie Turner-Getty. Welcome back to my channel where it is all Revolutionary War all the time. I am a Revolutionary War researcher, writer, and speaker based in Massachusetts. And on this channel, I share my research, and also on this channel, we go on some historical action adventures in this area where we visit some of the sites such as battlefields, burying grounds, historic houses, where the events of the Revolutionary War actually happened. In today's video, we're going to discuss exactly where the Danvers men fought on April 19th, which happened to be the spot of the most intense fighting in the entirety of April 19th. We're also going to check out a monument that was dedicated to the men of Danvers almost 200 years ago, and check out some of their burial sites as well. Welcome to Monotomy. Now, this is not Lexington, and it is not Concord. Monotomy at the time was a small village that stood on the road of the British retreat when the British were retreating from Concord and attempting to reach the safety of Boston. It was here in Menotomy, in this small village, where the heaviest fighting of April 19th occurred. And it was here that the Danvers men fought. But how did they end up here in Menotomy? Danvers is 16 miles away. And yet, when the British moved through Menotomy on their retreat that afternoon of the 19th, the Danvers companies were already here waiting for them. How did they get to Menotomy so quickly? The answer is they ran. The news that the British had left Boston and were moving through the countryside reached Danvers at about 9 or 9:30 a.m. on the morning of the 19th. Danvers had as many as 8 companies respond to the Lexington Alarm and sent as many as 331 men. They set out from all different parts of Danvers, which at the time encompassed a vast swath of land, and took all different roads leading to the Lexington Concord area in the southwest. But they didn't end up in Lexington or Concord. They all ended up in Menotomy. It took the men from Danvers about 4 hours to make the 16-mile trek to Menotomy, which is modern-day Arlington, Massachusetts. 60 years later, Captain Gideon Foster, who led a company of Minutemen from Danvers into battle, remembered that the men ran. They were going to lose almost as many men as Lexington itself. And 7 of those men were going to come home the next day in the back of a wagon that was carrying the bodies of the Essex County men who had been killed in battle. The British withdrew from Concord and began to make their way back to Boston, a journey of about 16 miles again, to the southeast. By this time, there were about 1,700 British troops about to enter Menotomy. Simultaneously, hundreds and probably a couple thousand militiamen from all of the various towns in the countryside that had received the alarm began to converge on Menotomy in this area. So the companies of militia sent out from all of the towns in the vicinity that had received the alarm began to arrive. Danvers holds the distinction of being the farthest flung town that actually responded and sent men into battle. This is the road that the British were retreating down, and it's called Massachusetts Avenue today. As the companies of militia all converged on this area, there was no overarching plan of attack. Rather, the companies and the men situated themselves all along the road wherever they thought best. Now, at this point, the British column, as it moved through on its retreat, which had really developed into a running battle, the British column was not just being attacked from the rear. It was not just the rear of the column that was being harassed by militia. It was being attacked from the sides as well. The militia companies that arrived in Monotomy took positions on both sides of the road before the British passed through. Upon their arrival, the Danvers men, including Gideon Foster's Minute Company, took positions from wherever they could find some cover, wherever they could fire from. So behind walls, behind trees, near houses, like this one. This house in 1775 belonged to 59-year-old Jason Russell, and it was here, in this very house and on this very property, that the Danvers men positioned themselves. This house would prove to be the single bloodiest location during the battles of Lexington, Concord, and Menotomy. The beautiful, peaceful, autumnal facade of this house belies the fact that more men died here on April 19th, 1775 than anywhere else. Now, tradition holds that one of the Danvers captains, Israel Hutchinson, said something to the effect of, "I don't like this position. We're too close to the road. We've got to move." But it was too late. The British had sent out flankers, and the jobs of flankers were to move ahead of and alongside of the main British column in order to clear out any obstacles that threatened the safety of the main body of troops. So sweeping out anything that threatened the safe passage of the main column, and that included militiamen. Within moments, British flankers were upon the Danvers militiamen. The Danvers men found themselves trapped in between parties of British flankers behind them and the main body of troops in front of them. And this all unfolded in Jason Russell's yard. There was nowhere to go. Many Essex County militiamen actually ran into Jason Russell's house in a desperate bid for safety, but were pursued by British troops, and many men were killed inside the house. Jason Russell himself, the owner, was killed on his doorstep. and other Essex County militiamen were killed outside on the property. 7 of the Danvers men were killed. At some point the next day, the bodies of the Danvers men who were killed were gathered and placed on a wagon to be transported back to Essex County. Not all of the men who died in battle that day, or should I say not all of the Essex County men who died in battle that day, were brought home. Some were interred in Menotomy in a mass grave with some civilians from Menotomy who were also killed that day, including Jason Russell, the 59-year-old homeowner who was killed on his doorstep. The wagon carrying the bodies of the 7 Danvers men made its way home the next day, traversing the same 16-mile journey that the men had made the day before. Decades and decades after the Revolution, a former mayor of Lynn, Massachusetts, which is, again, another coastal town in Essex County, who responded to the Lexington Alarm. This mayor recalled that his grandmother was 10 years old in 1775, and later in life, she would recall that wagon carrying the Danvers men passing her house. And what she most talked about was the fact that she remembered the men, the bodies of the men in the back of the wagon, were all wearing gray homespun stockings. And this woman's name, the woman who was 10 years old in 1775 and was the grandmother of a later mayor of Lynn, was named Joanna Mansfield. And I never really knew quite what to make of that story. I thought it sounded incredibly poignant and was such an interesting detail from the day, but I didn't really know if it was true because it surfaced in these kind of 19th century history books and it wasn't really substantiated. But I dug into it and learned that her dad, and this is really the detail for me that kind of nails it, that makes me believe this sort of tradition or story. Her dad was Ebenezer Mansfield, and he served in the company of Captain Ezra Newhall of Lynn, which responded to the Lexington Alarm and fought at Monotomy. So her father was there fighting alongside all of these men from Essex County in Monotomy. And I think that lends a lot of credence to the story. Here is the monument dedicated to the men of Danvers, and it stands in modern day Peabody, Massachusetts, which again was part of Danvers in 1775. And this monument is almost 200 years old. It was dedicated to the men in 1835 in a ceremony that Captain Gideon Foster spoke at. He was 26 in 1775, so he was about 86 when he made his remarks at the dedication of this monument. And it was he that remembered that the men ran to battle. And here are the names and the ages of the 7 men who were killed. Samuel Cook, age 33, Benjamin DeLand, age 25, George Southwick, age 25, Jotham Webb, age 22, Henry Jacobs, age 21, Ebenezer Goldthwaite, age 21, and Pearlie Putnam, age 21. Jotham Webb was married only 3 weeks before getting killed at the battles of Lexington and Concord, and George Southwick's wife gave birth to their 4th child, a boy, on April 21st, 1775, 2 days after his father's death and on the day of his father's burial. Here we are just down the road and around the corner from the Peabody Monument. We're here at the Old South Church Cemetery, and it's thought that 4 of the militiamen killed on April 19th from Danvers were buried here. The exact location of the graves has been lost over the century, so the actual grave sites are unknown currently. But the town of Peabody requested that these modern headstones be placed here in order to honor the lives of the men. For more on what happened at Jason Russell's house and the close quarters hand-to-hand combat that occurred there between American militiamen and British troops, check out this video where I actually go to the house and visit it and walk the grounds. Also, I'll put a video about Lexington Green and what happened in those early morning hours as the British approached Lexington on April 19th, before those fateful shots which sparked the American Revolution were fired. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know by clicking the like button, and I hope you'll consider subscribing to this channel so you can join in on all our historical action adventures. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.